if that child was still alive. And the ridiculous stories that come out about, we've seen it in a supermarket and this, that, and the other. They're never cited with a source. Nobody ever knows who gave this information. Yet the Metropolitan Police keep spending money on this. Why don't they help, for example, the family of Luke Durban, whose son disappeared from Ipswich, and that's 10, 15 years ago, and his mother works for missing people. Why don't they help Kerry Needham, whose child disappeared in Greece? These are more ordinary people. Why don't they get help?
Yeah, and I just want to say that our hearts go out to the family of the 9-year-old girl in Liverpool, because imagine, you've just got a little daughter like that. 1 minute she's there, next minute she's dead. It's an absolute heinous, disgusting crime. Kev Warren, who was Michael Francese's bodyguard, he sent me a couple of clips yesterday when he was walking around Liverpool, his thoughts on the matter. And we have put a couple of our podcast guests out of Liverpool forward for the Piers Morgan Uncensored show, going out this week. Hopefully, their viewpoints will be expressed. And the bottom line is, the war on drugs and drug laws, I believe, are a root cause of all of this. The violence of the drug.
It's very sad that a family who were totally innocent were dragged into this because of a war between probably drug lords, and that they were dragged into this, and they came into invaded their house and killed their child.
Yeah, it's an iron law of economics that the most violent gang will control the drug market. So there's been an arms race amongst these gangs all over the world, as we've seen with the cartels, whereby people are now, the whole families now are tortured, and it's put online. The mafia in the old days, you don't harm women, don't harm kids, it's all out the window. Now there's an arms race whereby whoever commits the most extreme violence will maximize their profits from the drug market. And what is the most traded drug in the world? Weed. And it is an absolute crime that the government continues to allow criminals to run, control, and fight over this black market that is generating billions a year. The black market in drugs is estimated at $1 trillion a year right now. Billions a year in profits getting handed over to gangs who can arm themselves to the teeth and commit these heinous crimes. So the government needs to look at its own policies instead of just being a reactionary entity that wants to make headline news, throw all these police on the streets, pretend to be tough on crime, pretend to be clamping down, when they can damn well go back and address the root cause of what's causing this in the first place.
I quite agree with you. I think it's a disgrace.
And it's only going to get worse. All right, on a lighter note then, Maid Marian Matthew has asked, what do you think about Anthony Joshua losing the boxing match the other night?
I can't say I'm an expert on boxing, but it all sounds rather a mess, and I don't think I can really answer any more than that.
Yeah, and Tyson Fury's demanding a massive fee now to fight Usyk, and I think he'll be the one who's going to sweep all these belts. Are you a Tyson Fury fan, Matthew?
Sorry? Are
you a Tyson Fury fan, Matthew?
I think that the man is definitely a character, and I have to say, coming from near where he lives in Morecambe in Lancashire, I used to live near there. I think the community there is very much behind him, and I think he's someone who's turned his life around and made something of himself. So yes, I would root for him. Yes,
he is an absolute legend and a character, and we'd love to get him on the podcast at some point. So the Jolly Man. I mean, if you've just tuned in, it's Ask Matthew Anything, AMA, and the Jolly Man's got an interesting one here.
Pagans, are we?
Did ancient civilizations become cannibalistic and into human sacrifice, or did they follow the sun?
Well, the people I witnessed on the beach here in Broadstairs on the summer solstice were very much sun worshippers. There are supposedly a coven of Wiccans down here, and they gather in the woods and do whatever they do. Now, I don't think these people harm anything, and but I don't know much about their activities. You do read about people using such things for purposes of bad, but I think they're mostly harmless.
T. O'Shaughnessy would like to know, Matthew, what drew you to true crime in the first place? Where did it all start?
Well, I think the first time I experienced true crime was when I was a child, and we were going to a wedding of my aunt's close friend, and we were driving to Oxfordshire, and we stayed somewhere, and I was with my grandmother and my mother, and we were in a holiday cottage that we were renting, and it came on the television that the lady we were due to go to this marriage of had been shot with a crossbow, and she was murdered, and her murder has never been solved. Her late name was Diana Moores. You won't find much about her on the internet, but it was a very unusual killing in West London. To be killed with a crossbow, and it kind of scared me and made me think about things. And I was very young, and that stuck in my mind. And then gradually, more and more of these cases started. I read about things. I used to love Miss Marple. Miss Marple was my Sunday evening viewing by the fireside, and I loved the theme tune, and I loved the way that she solved simple crimes.
Princess Diana Boston breaks. Is that
well, I think the big problem with the death of Princess Diana is the fact that the bodyguard appeared to have been, drinking or intoxicated. The car that Mohammed Fayed had supplied had been chopped up. It was a car that had lots of problems. If she had taken royal bodyguards, things may have been rather different to the amateurish people who drove her in that tunnel. Now, the thing about the Fiat Panda, that's very bizarre. Yes, the man disappearing and he's dead, and there are many theories about it, but again, I can't answer that because I don't know. I think there are many strange things. She believed that someone would kill her, and a car accident was something she talked about. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, as you know, so I don't know.
Well, there's an endless fascination with secret societies on this channel, and Zaref the Alchemist would like your thoughts on the Club of Rome, the Bilderbergs, and the RIIA.
I think that the likes of Bilderberg are groups of very powerful people who come together, and they do change the world. And whether they change it for the benefit of you or I is very questionable. And I've written in the past about a man who owns a thing you may have read called Breitbart, which is a right-wing channel, and he funds things in Britain like the Taxpayers Alliance, which is nothing to do with supporting taxpayers. It's a lobby group for the likes of Nigel Farage's friends, and his name is Robert Mercer. And these people have more powerful than prime ministers and presidents. And when they come together, they get things done their way. And a lot of people on your channel talk about the Rothschilds, and yes, the likes of Rothschild linked to a lot of these people. And we won't talk about, the lady who I've written most about, but they all link together. Yes.
What about Klaus Schwab? This Klaus Schwab guy. What are your thoughts on him?
Another person with too many connections. So when you get to these connections, I will see if I can quickly find you. In fact, I do things like that. I put together.
Is that the inside of your brain right there, externalized?
That's my mind map, and I put together the connections between these people. And some connections are weak and some are much stronger, but these people all come together when it suits them to benefit themselves and their connections. And that is sometimes it can be for the good of the world. Sometimes it's most definitely not.
What about when Alex Jones
family? Yes, the Bakeland family were a very interesting family. I have written quite a bit about that. if you're interested in that, you should watch a film with Julianne Moore and Eddie Redmayne. It's called Savage Grace. So Anthony Bakeland was the son of an American lady who was an actress who married the heir to the Bakelite plastic fortune. And they were very sociable people. They were very strange people. They had very warped morals. It was in the 1950s or 60s. And they traveled extensively. They moved to London and they brought this child with them. The child was very strange. It used to pull the wings off butterflies, and it was obsessed with its dog. And when its dog died, it slept with its dog's collar forevermore. And the boy was clearly gay, but his mother didn't like him being gay. So the mother decided to sleep with her own son to try and make him straight, which was a very strange thing to do. And meanwhile, he was bringing home his school friends, and they lived in Cadogan Square. The father took a liking to one of these children and eventually ended up living or marrying one of them. And that made the child even more angry. And the whole series of events occurred. And ultimately, one night, the boy, who was called Anthony Bakeland, decided to murder his mother. And he tried to throw her under a car previously. She'd been to see a psychiatrist who'd said, "Be warned, this child will kill you." And she said, "No, it won't." And anyway, the child eventually killed the mother. And then he didn't ring the police. He rang for a Chinese takeaway. And eventually the police came and he was locked up. And because of all these well-meaning rich people, he was allowed out. And on the condition he went back to America, and he was put on a plane with a minder to take him there. And he told the minder, "I will kill my grandmother," because he was going to live with her. He stabbed her, I think, 47 times. Somehow she miraculously survived. He was put in Rikers Island, and again, he thought he would get out because of all the well-meaning friends. And he was told, "You won't be getting out," and then he killed himself. So it was a very tragic story of wealth. And there were people, the parents were friends with people like Pablo Picasso and, all sorts of people, Warhol. And it was a very high, but this child had a warped upbringing. And the story is very well told in this film, Savage Grace, which I urge people to watch.
I need to watch that. What a fantastic question and an unexpectedly harrowing answer.
Yes.
Project Reject, Matthew. The World Economic Forum is financially backed by Lucis Trust, founded by Alice Bailey, originally called Lucifer Trust. Any veracity to that?
I don't know the specifics of that, but yes, these trusts all have very odd backgrounds and odd people involved in them. And I've been sent something by the lady who we talked with in the past, Kirby Summers, and we won't go into what she talked mostly about, but I'm looking into something with her of a similar nature. And there are connections with the likes of Freemasonry and heaven and hell and all these kind of things. And yes, they do have odd names, a lot of them.
What are your thoughts on the murder of Jill Dando? This is from Robert Marshall.
Well, the murder of Jill Dando interests me in some ways because obviously my mother and my aunt's friend, Diana Moores, was shot with a crossbow on her doorstep in West London at a similar, slightly earlier, but that sort of time. And it was a similar sort of aged woman of connections of the similar type. And the Jill Dando matter is more complicated in that, she was the Crime Watch presenter and she talked about Bosnia, and they say it was a warlord perhaps. And then there was her links to her knowledge of Jimmy Savile. She had spoken out about Jimmy Savile. She was connected to all sorts of people. She had a friendship with Jeffrey Archer. She knew all sorts. she had a husband, fiance who seemed like a successful man, and there were all sorts of people with motive, and I feel sorry for that poor man who was falsely imprisoned because they clearly pinned it on him just to try and shut the whole matter down. Now, again, we don't know the truth of it, but it's definitely more likely linked to her work on Crime Watch than it was to anything else.
Is that a bit like they pinned it on Jeremy Bamber to shut the whole matter down?
Well, again, I was on there the discussion with the people we talked with the other day, Philip and Yvonne, and again, you look at the police records and the way things were handled. Now, I don't know whether he was innocent or guilty, but I think there is a need for a reinvestigation of such a story because the police burned evidence. They took it home with them and they destroyed it. Why would you do that if you didn't have something to hide?
So with this next question, and Ash has sent in a reminder for us not to mention the grand old Duke of York in your response to this one, or to skirt around it somehow.
Yes.
Maybe just say the Duke perhaps. So any info on the girl found drowned in a pond at Sandringham?
I don't know what became of that story, but yes, there was a person who drowned there, and there was or was found dead there. But people are found dead in many different places, and it's a vast estate of 30,000 or something acres. So it could be purely coincidental, or it could be something more sinister. But I was looking up at the weekend because of my friend being missing. I looked up the missing persons unit, and I was shocked, and I'm sure you've obviously seen such things yourself, but the number of people whose bodies are found in this country and nobody knows who they are. Some of the people listed on this site, it just said, looked like a vagrant, found with a set of keys, don't know who they are, might be about 50 years old. And that's how they're marked down. And, isn't it sad that that's how somebody could be remembered, and people out there don't even look for them? And,
wow.
With the case of Luke Durban, the boy who disappeared in Ipswich, they recently found remains in a river near there. And, of course, immediately the people thought maybe it was him, or maybe they thought it was this Corrie McKeague, who was the airman who went missing, who they've recently had the big inquest into. And it wasn't. It was somebody else, and nobody knows who it is. So with the case of the girl in the pond, I don't know what became of that, because I've never heard any more, which suggests they don't even know who it was. But I may be wrong. Maybe there is more on that I haven't heard about.
What are your thoughts about people printing out guns at home using 3D printers?
Well, I think that's highly irresponsible. I don't think that should be encouraged by anybody. I think we need to be very careful about guns, and you have to look at the situation in America. I'm not an anti-gun person, but I think the way in which people are encouraged to use guns should be monitored, and we should be careful about it. We have less gun crime here, that is because of the way the gun laws are compared to America. But I think it's again about who controls the gun. If you get a bad person with a gun, you only look at what happened in Dunblane, and again that links back to the Freemasonry stuff with that man's connections. And if you allow a bad person to get hold of a gun, then bad things are going to happen.
What's the worst criminal you've come across? Well, we did a documentary on Savile, didn't we? So that's one of the worst.
Well, but that's not somebody I've actually met.
Okay.
Are they saying the worst person I've ever met?
Perhaps that is the question. Yep.
Gosh, I think the strangest I met was a waiter who I knew in a restaurant in Chelsea, and he was a nice, innocent person, but I couldn't fathom why he was able to afford to live in an apartment around the corner from the restaurant. And he had a girlfriend who seemed very attractive and a little older than him, and she had a child. And one night he left the restaurant, and I remember sitting and having a drink with the staff, and I remember him leaving, and he went home and he discovered her with somebody else, and basically she had worked as a prostitute, and that was how they afforded to live the way they did. And he didn't realize this. I think he was a little naive, and he killed her and tried to kill the child. And he wrote to me from prison on remand and asked if I would support him, and I couldn't fathom why I would want to support such a person after what he did to this woman and her child, because the child was very lucky to live. And yes, people have moments of intense passion, but that was awful what happened there, and I was horrified by it. But I've spoken with people who, I've corresponded with other people in prison who have done very bad things, and people who I believe to be innocent. And the case of Mark Alexander, I think there's somebody who has never admitted his guilt and is being tortured in prison as a result, and it's totally wrong. And I think there are cases of grave injustice out there, and you know about this more than anything else. For all these people that are very guilty and should be in there forever and ever, there are people who really have been put in the wrong place, and it's absolutely terrible.
Matthew, you've been a gentleman as usual during this AMA. We're going to have to do an AMA part 2. Ask Matthew anything part 2. And the answers.
To fill in, but I'm sorry I'm not as exciting a guest as the other one. But
well, everybody has been absolutely delighted with you stepping in and taking all these questions, and a huge thank you to all the viewers as well. I'll be back in 30 minutes with a dark journalist, and please support Matthew at the Steeples Times. Links will be in the description box. You're welcome to pester him on Twitter, send in questions, stalk him. He tries to give everybody a response. His Twitter handle's down there. And again, have a great rest of your day on the South Coast, Matthew.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
See you, Matthew.
Okay, bye-bye.
Cheerio.